Welcome into Fantasy Football Night in America. This is the high stakes fantasy football show for December 14th, 2023. I am your fearless and somewhat borderline respected host, Eric Balkman, at Eric Balkman on the X Machine. Of course, you can check me out with the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and the Fantasy Football Players Championship. So glad to be with you tonight. We're going to be with you all the way up till 9 o'clock Eastern time tonight, which means we're taking you through that first quarter of the Chargers-Raiders game, which reminds me, I got to get my setup here going so I can watch that game while we take you through it and offer our own little bulky cast, as it were, on the show with myself and my good buddy, host extraordinaire from Best Bell Fantasy, at FF Stalder on the X. It is Bradley Stalder. Bradley, welcome in, man.
Yeah, thanks, Balky. Appreciate you inviting me back yet again. It was a great time last time. And I'm honored that you'd invite me back. I must not have messed up too badly, despite the Dwayne McBride take,
I forgot about that. That's true. No, I have one of the great things about a co-host coming on this show is I have set the bar so low for fantasy analysis that everybody I come on, yourself included, leaps over it like a horse at an equestrian event. It's like it's not close. So I'm just thankful that here's all I do. Like, I'm not even the pitcher throwing the meatballs. I'm the coach at the t-ball game, raising up the tee and just putting the ball on top of it. And then I just throw up my hands and I'll ask you the follow-ups. But pretty much I want to pick your brain. Our listeners, our viewers, they want to pick your brain. And it's crunch time. We got 3 weeks to go, Bradley. How's the season going for you?
Oh, I'm excited. I've got a lot of DK best ball moving along. Underdog, is not available in Michigan. So all of my drafts are like slow when I've been in Ohio on vacation. So, it was an average year in the underdog streets. But I'm excited. I'm second place in my division in the FFPC Pros versus Joes tournament. So I have a lot of ground to make up to get that first place prize. But hopefully Tyreek gets himself healthy so that I'm competitive there. But it's been a lot of fun playing in that tournament this year.
Yeah, it's always fun for sure. And we're glad to have you aboard for that as well. Coming up on tonight's show, we're going to help get you through your Week 15 prep, everything you need to know, including for tonight's game. Tyler Soto, the man behind the glass, just updated us that Josh Jacobs is officially out. We'll talk about that in 1 second. Before we get to that, I do want to remind everybody, we'll be going through the Better Cast coming up at the bottom of this hour, helping you set those over-unders so you can win big on the Better Cast tonight for the Chargers and Raiders game. And then we'll kick off hour number 2, find out where Bradley stands on certain players including, but not limited to, Jerick McKinnon, Devontae Smith, Austin Eckler, and much more. And then we'll do some starts or sits at the end of the program as we take you all the way through the first quarter of tonight's game. Chuba Hubbard, Hunter Henry, George Pickens, just a few of the players we'll be talking about there. Want to remind everybody, too, in case you are wondering, you can go to myffpc.com right now to play the FFPC Weekly Challenge. There's no draft or salary cap. You just choose the 10 players or 12 players if you want to play with kickers and defenses by kickoff on Sunday, and then just watch your points pile up through the weekend's game. Only one player per NFL team. No stacking in this. That's the slant. That's what makes it so fun, maddening, and enjoyable. $35 or $200 to enter, depending upon which contest you want to enter it, and you can win up to $2,500. Also at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Play the FFPC playoff challenges, which are open right now. Again, no draft or salary cap. You're picking one roster for the duration of the postseason. One player per team. Obviously, you can't pick them yet because we don't know who's going to be in the postseason, but you can start signing up and get those entries locked away so you can fill those up when the playoff schedule is announced. Remember, only one player per NFL team, $35 or $200 to enter there. $500,000 grand prize for the $200 contest, and the $100,000 grand prize will be awarded to the winner of the $35 contest. Again, that's at myffpc.com. Bradley, we're going to get into the Raiders and Chargers in the second segment, but I think it's worth mentioning this Jacobs thing that came down the pike. We found out about this, I don't know, a few hours ago, earlier this afternoon, that it probably was not going to happen for Jacobs against the Chargers tonight. Now we get the official word that he is on the inactive list. Davante Adams is active. Joshua Jacobs is not. What are you expecting fantasy-wise and I got a ton of questions about Zamir White the last couple hours. Not too many about Amir Abdullah. What are you sort of expecting from Zamir White tonight, as he should be the early down guy?
Yeah, that is the expectation there, Eric, that Zamir White, the Raiders' 4th-round pick from last year out of Georgia, is going to get the start, and not only get the start, but the bulk of the carries. You mentioned Amir Abdullah as being, a player that the Raiders have used in the past and passing downs and occasionally sprinkling in behind Jacobs. But Zamir White is someone that I think is worth putting on your flex radar for tonight. Especially because we're hurt by injuries. You're not sure if Devon Achane, who we'll talk about more later, is going to be available. Keenan Allen is out for this game. You may be in dire straits. You need someone with a pulse. Zamir White profiles as that type of player. The reality is, this was not the head coach who drafted him. This was not so there's opportunity here. I think this is a fresh start for Zamir White tonight, and maybe this will bump him up into our rankings. Maybe we'll see, some of these best ball teams that took late round Zamir White being paid off. But I think he's on the flex radar. Nothing more, though, because we've seen over the last couple of years that he's been active. He's played in 27 games, only 37 rush attempts, and under 4 yards a carry in his NFL career. Yes, not a lot of rush experience, but we have concerns that he can't access that elite upside that we're looking for. So I'm tempering expectations for tonight. He's on the flex radar, but nothing more.
I had one of my friends ask me about Zamir White versus Ty Chandler, because Alexander Madison got ruled out today as well for Sunday. And I told him, I think Ty Chandler, I don't know if Zamir White's any good. Do we know if he's any good? I mean, you draft a ton of these best balls. Was there ever a time we were looking at these one injury away type guys where Zamir White seemed like he was the one injury away guy for the Raiders? Like, there was no other challengers there. I would think that if we're applying the process of wanting to get these, late round running back guys that all they need is the opportunity, we would have drafted Zamir White. I didn't really draft him a whole lot of spots. Did you draft him anywhere? I just don't know if he's good.
Yeah, and I think last year this past offseason, we were operating under the assumption that he's just going to maintain that role of maybe he'll get 20 carries this season. And even if he does get, we do get the Josh Jacobs injury, is it really going to be Zamir White? Because we saw Brandon Bolden get some touches, in previous seasons. We saw Amir Abdullah. And so when it comes to the Minnesota running back situation, I am, of course, biased because of the Dwayne McBride, take that colors me. But Minnesota gets Cincinnati. And this is a game that's much more interesting to me from a shootout upside perspective. Remember, the Chargers are taking on the Raiders, and it's Easton Stick versus O'Connell, right? This is not an enticing matchup from a fantasy perspective, whereas Minnesota is taking on Cincinnati. And that game can turn into a shootout pretty quickly. Jake Browning, is going to get the nod for Cincy, but for the Vikings, it's Nick Mullins, and we've seen Nick Mullins just air out the ball in previous years. We also know that the Vikings are willing to air it out, just as a team. Like the head coach there is willing to have the quarterback throw the ball a ton. So the pass rate over expectation is there for Minnesota, but that can also mean fantasy points for Ty Chandler out of the backfield in PPR situations. As you said, we're not sure if Zamir White is any good. We've seen some flashes from Ty Chandler of being fantasy useful.
And we also saw Kevin O'Connell make the change this week from Josh Dobbs going from starter down to third. Now you had Nick Mullins in there, who actually looked all right. I mean, if anybody looked halfway decent in that game, that Vikings-Raiders game, it had to be Nick Mullins. And that was basically it. Or maybe Greg Joseph, because he made that field goal, the only guy to score in the game. So I think there's something to be said for that as well. Let's go to the YouTube chat right now. Uncle Andy's hanging out watching us there. We appreciate that, Uncle Andy. He's got a starter sit question for tonight. Zamir White or Chase Brown? The suddenly resurgent Chase Brown for the Cincinnati Bengals, playing behind Joe Mixon, but he's getting worked in there, not only with rushing the ball, but catching as well. I think you kind of alluded to this a little bit. You're talking about the possibility that Bengals-Vikings game turns into a shootout. I agree with you. And not only that, I think it is significantly higher of a chance for that game to go to a shootout compared to what we have tonight with the Raiders and Chargers. I really don't see it happening. You're talking about Easton Stick. You're talking about Aiden O'Connell. You're talking about a banged-up Devontae Adams, Austin Eckler, who's been kind of a mess this year. We'll get into him later. I think that you go with the upside here. I know Zamir White is the starter, but if Amir Abdullah is neutering him on third down, taking those catches away, why wouldn't we start the third down guy for the Bengals, a guy who's been getting worked in there with Mixon? I kind of like Chase Brown over Zamir White, as crazy as that sounds. Or does that sound crazy to you, Bradley?
Well, I do have my initial rankings out on bestballfantasy.com, and I do have Zamir White over Chase Brown, but those are median, projections. I'm not usually like taking swings on like high, wild takes, but the reality is Chase Brown did get 8 carries, and he got 9 carries in week 13 against Jacksonville. So we have seen an uptick in usage over the last couple of weeks. I still anticipate Joe Mixon to be the main ball carrier and to be the primary goal line back. So we like that Chase Brown got 105 yards, but it was on one big play that he got that 60, 70 yard, play. We like that. We don't see Joe Mixon doing those types of things, but in the range of outcomes, the most likely scenario is that Zamir White outplays Chase Brown this week.
I totally get that. And it's not like I have strong feelings on, oh my goodness, it's Chase Brown. It's a slam dunk. You start, I could see, there's what are we guessing here? We're guessing probability. What's the probability? Well, I would guess 55 to 60% of the time, in my opinion, you're going to see Chase Brown outscore Zamir White. That leaves a pretty big chunk for Zamir White to still outplay and outscore Chase Brown this week as well. We're dealing with probability. That's what we do. Let's go to Gooner Boy hanging out on YouTube. This is a good lead-in to our Devon Achane discussion. So Gooner Boy has Keenan Allen and Devon Achane. Obviously, Keenan Allen is out tonight. You're not playing him. Does he play Zamir White over Devon Achane, who we don't really know what's going on with him yet? And he's got to make a decision tonight. He has to start 2 from Jaylen Warren, Deontay Johnson, Devon Achane, and he's adding Zamir White into that pool as well. The latest we have on Devon Achane, according to Adam Kaplan, Devon Achane with that toe injury. Achane did not practice today. Mike McDaniel obviously said earlier that it's unknown as far as what his availability is. Now we got to watch Hard Knocks to see what we can glean from that, right? When the Dolphins played the Jets in Week 12, Achane was for the most part healthy, and he didn't play a whole lot. It was a blowout win. They're going to take on the Jets again this week. There's a non-zero chance that this guy is just sitting on the bench, or maybe he's active and they give him like 4 or 5 carries or something like that, because Raheem Mostert, at the tender age of 77 years old, is blowing our minds with what he's been able to do at his age. And this could be a big week for Raheem Mostert. Now, the question here, Bradley, as I know you can see, is it worth waiting on Achane to pass on, the bird in the hand in Zamir White tonight against the Chargers?
I am worried about Achane's availability for Sunday or whenever they play this week. The reality is, Achane, I can't keep straight now. Is it the Saturday?
We got Saturday games.
Sunday
it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. I am looking at it right now. It is a 1:00 start for the Dolphins on Sunday.
Okay. Yeah, I am still concerned because the Dolphins have shown that they are conservative with Achane. He didn't play in week 1. They put him on injured reserve when, if you're reading the tea leaves, he probably shouldn't have been put on injured reserve. Like, the injury did not seem like a 4-week plus injury. And then when he came back in week 11, it was 4% snap share. And then he missed week 12, and so you see like these issues crop up, and the Miami Dolphins have a history already of establishing Achane as a conservative, from a conservative perspective. So I am concerned that Achane is going to be available for this week. There always seems to be something popping up this year, and it would not surprise me, and I would play Zamir White, bird in the hand, over Achane.
And that's, so if we look at this here, Achane plays at 1 o'clock on Sunday. Now, he does have two other options here, Jaylen Warren and Deontay Johnson. Problem with that, those guys play on Saturday. So you're still not going to know officially with Achane. I wouldn't mess around with it here. It would make sense with Zamir White. I personally like Johnson and Warren. I like the two Steelers over White tonight. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would probably go with those. I think Jaylen Warren is a borderline top 24 option. I have Zamir White outside of that for right now. And Deontay Johnson is still getting the targets. I'm not too worried. I mean, Mitch Trubisky isn't great. Let's not give him too much credit. But Deontay Johnson and Jaylen Warren, I think, over Zamir White is just fine.
Let's talk about Snakir 901's question, who's hanging out watching us on Twitch. No Jacobs for Snakir 901 tonight. Zamir White, Jerick McKinnon, and Keaton Mitchell are the options here. So I'm going to eliminate Zamir White. I like McKinnon and Mitchell better. My brain tells me it's McKinnon-Sember, basically. We're in the month of McKinnon-Sember. Not really catchy, but I don't have a better way of saying it. But Keaton Mitchell, man, I mean, guy's a big play waiting to happen. I know it's sort of like a three-headed backfield there, but I think Mitchell's the most talented of those three. And I really like the way that the Ravens offense is just cooking right now. If you can only play one, I lean towards Mitchell over McKinnon. What say you, Mr. Stalder?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go McKinnon still. Assuming that Isaiah Pacheco is out, because he is trending that way. I'm reading the tea leaves as well. I run the news desk of Player Profiler for a reason. There's the news tends to get amplified. Reading some of the beat writers and what they're saying about Isaiah Pacheco not being available at practice, it's trending toward him not being available, which means it's Jerick McKinnon or Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And we saw last week, yes, Clyde Edwards-Helaire out carried McKinnon, but McKinnon was able to, he looked better, number one. And number two is he got the goal line carry. Yeah. Which is what I thought that Clyde Edwards-Helaire would get. And that's why I ranked Clyde Edwards-Helaire above McKinnon last week. But if the Chiefs are, they're struggling on offense, as weird as that sounds, the Kansas City Chiefs struggling to score points, much less fantasy points for us. Their best option is Jerick McKinnon out of the backfield. I think Andy Reid is willing to use McKinnon, especially I was worried about, is McKinnon healthy? And I think that answered the question last week. Yes, he is. So I would lean McKinnon.
You lean McKinnon. I say Mitchell. It is very close. But that's the way we are talking about that. Okay. Moving on here back. What did I want to talk about next? Oh, Darren Waller. Death, taxes, and talking about Darren Waller's soft tissue issues. It's sort of what we do at least once or twice a year. The Giants have designated Darren Waller to return from injured reserve. Waller practiced today. And I believe he said, if I remember correctly, I think he said it went well, like there's no issues, which is good. That's what you want to see. He comes back to a team that is flying high with Tommy Cutlets looking like the second coming of some other Italian quarterback that crushed the NFL for a while. I don't know who that would be, but he comes back to an offense that's, I don't want to say that it's cooking, but the water's starting to boil there and they're almost ready to put the food in the pot. So I look at Darren Waller. Let's small scope it. Let's not do big picture. Small scope. If he comes back this week, would you put him in your lineup? And we'll assume FFPC tight end premium here. Is this a guy that you at least have to flex out, Bradley?
This is one, of course, all of it depends on who you have. Right. And we've seen the high and low for Darren Waller this year, partly, yes, because of the injury, but partly because of the inconsistent quarterback play, and bizarre play calling and offensive line struggles, et cetera, et cetera. Inconsistent play from Waller earlier in the season anyways. We saw before the injury, Darren Waller finished no lower than tight end 26 on the week, but as high as the tight end 2. And maybe this will blow your mind, Balky, maybe it won't. Darren Waller is the tight end at 22 in total fantasy points this season, and he's missed that many games. He's still on the IR. That's how bad.
That's crazy.
The tight end position.
I mean, is that a commentary on? I mean, I look at it as a commentary on, like, okay, look what Waller has been able to do this year. but you think it's more indicative of how bad the landscape has been at the position.
I mean, it's both but Darren Waller he's not given you in what you drafted him at. He's not returned value. Injury aside, he was still, he only had 2 top 5 weeks, 3 top 10 weeks in the games that he played. The rest were outside of the top 12 of tight end. And while he was getting a lot of targets and getting a lot of yards, the touchdowns weren't there because the offense was struggling. So if you're telling me that now the offense is doing a little bit better, they're reinvigorated, they understand the scheme a little better, DeVito is willing to play a little bit more aggressive and is not turning the ball over, then we're looking at a better New York Giants offense that is going to target Darren Waller. And so if he's starting this week, and I haven't put him into my rankings quite yet because I'm not convinced that he does, we'll see. He'll go around tight end 12 or 13. I'd say Cole Kmet, Kyle Pitts-ish, if I were to have to put him into a spot right now, behind Dallas Goedert, behind David Njoku, behind Dalton Kincaid.
I think a lot of people, and I don't play in the FFPC because I'm an employee of the company, but when you talk about starting tight ends on a week-to-week basis with tight end premium scoring, and you have 2 flexes to play around, I feel like a lot of times players will go deep into even their 17th or 18th tight end. They're still seriously looking at starting. If he's like a borderline top 12 for you this week, and I know nobody's on bye, and I don't know what injury issues you might be having or whatever, but to me, I think Waller should probably be started in more leagues than he's benched. The only way I would say that's not the case is if these teams, which again, championship route of the FFPC main event, Fantasy Pros Championship, these should all be loaded teams. So then I guess you could make the case that he shouldn't be. I always bring this up too. If you are trying to increase variance, if you're in 150th or 200th place, and you don't want to go crazy week 1 with starting Joshua Kelly tonight or something in the hopes that he might drag you all the way up the board. I get that. But I think Darren Waller is a player that you could sneak into your lineups tonight because I don't know how many people got their teams through with Darren Waller as their number 1 tight end. And if you were fortunate enough to do it, you might not face a whole lot of people that are going to have him as well. The Giants this week, I'm looking at the schedule right now. I apologize if you mentioned this. At New Orleans, totals 39.5, 1 o'clock on Sunday. He's pushing to play. We're going to have to wait to find out if he actually does play, but at least you'll be able to wait on him for that time.
The New Orleans Saints give up the 8th most fantasy points to the tight end position in PPR scoring. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And we know Waller actually doesn't play the tight end position. Right. He plays wide receiver, big time wide receiver. So that is a plus matchup for Darren Waller if he is active. I'm not certain. I would say 50-50. We'll see.
Let's talk about a player that has fallen on kind of difficult times the last couple of weeks. Week 10, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8 for 156 and a touchdown. Week 11, 8 for 77 and a touchdown. Week 12, 9 for 95 and a touchdown. Week 13 at New Orleans, 2 for 49. He did get a touchdown, so that kind of saved you. Last week against the Bears, a game that they lost and were down most of the game. They lost by 15, 8 targets, 3 catches, 21 yards. That is not good, especially when the game script should have been lining up for St. Brown to really put up a big fantasy performance. Jared Goff, this according to Pro Football Talk on NBCSports.com, Jared Goff said that the Lions are trying to get St. Brown the ball in different ways after these last 2 duds. He said in week 13, the Saints double teamed him quite a bit. The Bears didn't have as many double teams on him, but that doesn't mean that they can't get St. Brown more involved. 87 for 1,063 and 6 touchdowns on the year. So you're loving what he's been able to do up until this point. But now with the fantasy playoffs, championship round here, you are hoping for much more than that. 7 for 70 is fine, but man, you want this guy putting up big weeks. I'm of the opinion this week that Amon-Ra St. Brown is due for a big game. I wouldn't say that he's been complaining, so I hesitate. It's the squeaky wheel getting the grease. But this seems like Detroit's like, look, we got to get back to what we do well. And one of the guys that makes us go is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown has a massive, massive week 15.
Well, this is one of those games where we want to be targeting players involved in the matchup between the Broncos and the Lions. The over-under for this game is 48. It's the Lions at home, favored by 4.5. So there's going to be points scored for the Detroit Lions. That's what Vegas is telling us. And Amon-Ra St. Brown last week had 2 drops. He had 2 drops in every other game combined this year. Mm-hmm. So I'm not too worried. Drops are, not. I'm not worried. Like, they're not indicators to me that a player has fallen off. It's just a bad game. Plus, we'll take a macro view of that matchup. It was the Bears coming out of a bye at home. Perfect trap game. Like, things just went completely wrong for the Lions. And I think they do get back to business. But this is also a Denver team that is resurgent. Their defense has played very well. However, this is in the Dome. This is not a weather game that the Broncos are sometimes used to. So I do expect a lot of fantasy points scored for Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's still the number 1 target. I'm not too worried about Amon-Ra. Fire him up.
Laporta, too. Yeah, bounce back for him this week, too?
Yeah. Okay. This is definitely an Amon-Ra Laporta game.
It is a get-right game for that Lions offense, let's hope. Ja'Marr Chase. Now, this is a guy I'm not as excited about. He says he expects to play against the Vikings. We kind of already talked about how this game, we both could see this game turning into a shootout. Now, if that happens, you'd like to think that Ja'Marr Chase would have a pretty big hand in that. He is not on the injury report anymore. Tyler Boyd, not on the injury report anymore. I would think that, well, I'll kind of let you talk about this. Here's the issue I have with Ja'Marr Chase. The last few weeks, while we have not had Joe Burrow throwing to him, Ja'Marr Chase has had games of, let's see here, 2 for 12 with a touchdown that saved you, 4 for 81, 11 for 149 against Jacksonville. He gets in the end zone there. Then last week, 3 for 29. And if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong on this, that 4 for 81 game he had against the Steelers at home, I feel like he caught 2 fluky tip balls in that game that were for like 40 or 50 yards or something combined. So I think that was kind of a fluke. You probably don't have better options out there, and you're probably just going to have to hope that the Bengals put up points and do numbers against the Vikings at home. But I'm a little bit nervous about Ja'Marr Chase this week. Championship round, you got to dance with who brung you, so you're putting Chase in there. But I'm lowering my expectations, Bradley. Am I wrong to do that with Chase in week 15 against the Vikings?
You're not wrong. I have Chase ranked outside my top 12 for this week. So we do have concerns, and that builds in the scarier floor that we've seen exhibited from Jake Browning and even just, Ja'Marr Chase this season. Chase can hit those ceiling weeks that we saw a couple weeks ago, but we've seen T. Higgins. We've seen some of the tight ends get more involved. You mentioned Chase Brown getting some touches, even along with Joe Mixon. And I think Jake Browning is leaning pretty heavily upon his running backs to be consistent contributors. So, while I'm not going to say advocate for Chase Brown, running back 1 or running back 2 necessarily, they have higher. There's a higher floor for those types of running backs compared to where the running back 2 on another team is for their floor. And that does affect the reads of Jake Browning to T. Higgins, to Ja'Marr Chase. So it's probably going to be a one or the other type of game, just like we saw T. Higgins get the touchdown in week 14. Yeah, we're concerned that Ja'Marr Chase could have a floor game in week 15.
A guy that I have always been excited to draft every single year. Obviously, when I have the opportunity, it's Ja'Marr Chase, but you don't always have the opportunity where he goes and drafts. A player that seems to fall to me all the time, and I always think he's undervalued, and perhaps I have my green and gold Packers fandom goggles on. But Aaron Jones, man, has been one of my favorite players to own in fantasy. He just puts up numbers. That's all he does. He has had a really, really rough year this year. He's had some clunkers when he's been healthy, I wouldn't say the Packers have always used him right when he's healthy, and he's been hurt most of the season. Like it's been like two full games that he has played this year for the Packers. Limited in practice today. He's trending towards a return this week against the Buccaneers. Now, here's the other interesting thing, and this is fascinating how this went down. Matt LaFleur was meeting with the media today, and he was asked about whether A.J. Dillon broke his thumb against the Giants. He said, "I'm not going to touch that." So when A.J. Dillon speaks to the media later, Rob Demovsky from ESPN asks A.J. Dillon, "How did you break your thumb?" A.J. Dillon speaks for 2-3 minutes, talking about never saying he broke his thumb, but basically saying, "Yeah, my thumb is broken." So LaFleur doesn't want to talk about it. And then one of the reporters said, "Hey, how'd you break your thumb?" And A.J. Dillon goes off on it. Thought that was very interesting. In any event, I don't think Dillon plays this week. Packers need warm bodies. Aaron Jones is probably going to be in there against Tampa. I kind of like this matchup, especially if Vita Vea doesn't play for Tampa. You could be looking at, again, a player that if you snuck through to the championship round with Aaron Jones as your running back too, Bradley, this could be a matchup that really moves you up a significant spot on the board if Jones is able to put up, close to 100 total yards, and maybe he gets in the end zone once or twice.
You talked about the ceiling games, and this is a possible ceiling game for Aaron Jones. We looked at week 1 against Chicago, only on 46% snaps. He finished as the running back 1 that week. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward to week 9 against the Rams, 20 carries, 6 red zone carries, 99 total yards, the touchdown, finishes the running back 7 for that week. So we've seen the ceiling games from him this year, and he's not needed 60+% of the snaps, right? And so even if Patrick Taylor is sprinkled in this week, and if A.J. Dillon is limited or out, this is a pathway for Aaron Jones to not only be a fantasy contributor for your lineup, but to access elite ceilings that we've seen not only in the past. Aaron Jones has been coming into this season a top 12 running back each of the last 4 years, but we've seen it this year. And so that is encouraging for us. So if he can get the volume plus a little bit of a shootout, between Tampa Bay and Green Bay, pulling up the over-unders here, it's 42.5. I think that I'd be interested in taking the over for 42.5.
Yeah. And that would make some sense too. I mean, we don't know if Godwin's going to play. I can't believe Mike Evans has held as quiet as he was last week for 2 consecutive games. Baker Mayfield, say what you will about him. It's kind of a weird scheduling thing. This is going to be his 3rd straight December where he plays at Lambeau Field. Christmas Day he did for the Browns a couple years ago. Had 4 picks that game. I think he had 3 turnovers last year when he played the Packers as a member of the Rams, and now he's coming in as a member of the Buccaneers to come in. So he's going to put the ball in play because he's going to want to make plays. I love Rachaad White in this game too. I mean, the Packers have been, I don't know if they're the worst team for stopping the run, but they got to be top 3 for worst. So I think Rachaad White has a big game. And I'm with you on Aaron Jones here too. I think this is a very compelling game for fantasy. And I think there's a lot more goodness in this game than a lot of people are saying.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I think Aaron Jones obviously is probably one of those low advanced rate type of running backs that you could separate yourself in the field from. So if you put Aaron Jones in the lineup, that if he's healthy, he's going to be minimum top 24 back because of the volume and because of the efficiency. So fire up your Aaron Jones this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. And now you aren't going to be firing up his real life teammate, Christian Watson. That guy's not going to play. It's not official yet, but I mean, 2 missed practices already this week for a soft tissue injury affecting the same hamstring he already hurt once this season. I don't like it at all. So that said, how do you feel about Romeo Doubs, and how close to must start is Jaden Reed when you consider I felt like he didn't do anything last week, and he put up 20 fantasy points in the FFPC, 8 catches for 27 yards, had a ton of jet sweeps, gets into the end zone as well. I mean, Jaden Reed, people have been, and I'll tell you this, in Northeast Wisconsin, there's plenty of people, smart people up here that have said Jaden Reed has been the best Packers receiver all season. And it's hard to go against that. And when you consider that you could put Aaron Jones in the backfield this week with Jaden Reed, play off each other, I think this could really, really be a beneficial game, not only for Jones, but Reed this week as well. What can you say about him as well as Doubs, Bradley?
Yeah, Jayden Reed has been a top 12 weekly wide receiver in 3 of the past 5 weeks. We're talking wide receiver 1 status, not just like on the Packers, but among all NFL wide receivers. Bulky, like, yeah, he's played really well. Yeah. But not only is he catching the ball, they are using him in the run game. He has 9 rushing attempts over his last 4 games. So they're trying to manufacture touches for a really dynamic player. You know, this was a player that I was sprinkling in my 3rd rounds of the rookie drafts, you know, in the dynasty streets. And he's really paid off, taking late in your best ball drafts at 10 targets this past game with Christian Watson out. He's an auto start for you in the flex or even as a wide receiver too, you know, given what we've seen him access ceiling wise and also the floor. Like one of the games where he wasn't top 12, he was wide receiver 25. Mm-hmm. So 4 of the last 5 weeks, he's been a top 25 wide receiver. We like that for Jayden Reed. And Romeo Doubs, I think, has a wider range of outcomes because he's not manufactured the touches. He kind of depends more on the lucky Jordan Love throws. Although, shout out to Jordan Love. Like, I was out on him at the beginning of the season, and then he was proving me right for the first half of the year, getting a little lucky with touchdowns. Yep. His completion percentage was atrocious. His PFF passing grade was really bad. NFL passer rating was atrocious. Like, just terrible metrics all around. And then suddenly 4 or 5 weeks ago, things started to turn around. And, you know, who ended up being in the lineup but Christian Watson, you know? And so maybe it was the healthy Christian Watson to get him right and build that confidence of, oh, I can actually throw the ball confidently to my best receiver. And I do believe that Christian Watson is a better overall receiver. Right. But, you know, with the injuries and with the rapport that has been built with Jayden Reed, how can you start Christian Watson over Jayden Reed moving forward until we see Watson get 2 consecutive games of consistency? Yeah. That's just how I approach it. Doubs is, you know, a desperation flex consideration, but nothing more than that. Like, I would start Zamir White over Romeo Doubs because of the range of the median projection that I would have for Zamir White.
Speaking of Zamir White, our man Jim Parsons Jr. hanging out on YouTube, he's got a decision tonight. Is it D'Onta Foreman for the Bears this week? Does he deploy him against the Browns, or does he play Zamir White tonight against the Chargers? Who you got here for JPJ?
Yeah, I do have Zamir White ranked over D'Onta Foreman. It's Roschon Johnson. It's Khalil Herbert, all splitting touches there in Chicago, whereas I expect Zamir White to get the bulk of the carries, even with D'Onta Foreman being we've seen him carry the bulk for Chicago in the past, but I am not banking on that remaining that way the rest of the way with Chicago. So give me Zamir White this week.
Bears are splitting the pie 3 ways against a pretty tough defense. Raiders going up against I don't want to say a soft defense, but maybe not as challenging one as Cleveland. And there are only 2 guys basically carrying the water tonight between White and Abdullah. Go with Zamir White, Jim Parsons Jr., and we'll see what happens there. We're going to see what's going to happen when we put Bradley Stalder on the spot next segment. The Better Cast Thursday Night Football, we're going to go through that. All the over-unders on guys like Aiden O'Connell, Joshua Palmer, Austin Eckler, Easton Stick. We'll get to all those coming up. He's Bradley Stalder from playerprofiler.com, bestbellfantasy.com, at FFStalder on the X. I'm Eric Balkman from the Ffpc. The Ffpc High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Fantasy Football Night in America rolls on the Better Sports Network right after this.
Of the NHL games, I had a conversation with Coop Fiasco yesterday when we were producing High Stakes, and he was talking about playing video games. And I, since he covers fantasy football, I said, hey, are you going to be getting the new Madden this year? And he goes, yeah, I don't really play Madden. I play NHL. And that tells you, and it really does, that I do feel that the NHL game is better than Madden. I feel like Madden is overrated. The NHL game is so realistic. I don't know if you guys saw the trailer and all the new additions that they added to this game, but it really looks good. I tried finding all the games that I had of NHL, and I thought I had a lot. I only have 4 of them. And that's because I used to live with my my roommate and good friend who, got me into hockey, and we would play most of it in his house. So he has most of the games, but I do got 21.
There you go.
I got
Okay.
NHL 18. We got Connor McDavid up there.
There you go.
NHL 12, I think, was the start of the new consoles for me. But the big one,
Okay.
the holy grail of NHL games, NHL 94
Oh, there
for
you
the
go.
Sega
I mean,
Genesis
there.
right there. Look at that. Look at that beautiful cover. Look at it. Looks like a VHS tape. That's how good this game was.
No, let me stop you right there. So people, VHS tape, if you don't know, it's this like rectangular black plastic with the magnetic tape on the inside. Tape's this big. You put it in something called the VCR. For a little while, there was something called Beta that didn't last too long.
Look at this cartridge. I mean, they're not cartridges anymore. They're either discs or those little memory cards. But man, that thing is thick, right? And
You don't
and
even
then
need a cartridge or a disc anymore. You can buy the digital version.
digital version.
Any
And
of
then you
that.
got Ron Barr on the book. I mean, he used to
Oh,
be
yeah.
always in the intro telling you about the team and what was going to be happening in the game. So NHL 94 is by far my favorite game, sports game. I love that game.
19 minutes until the top of the hour here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. He's Bradley Stalder from Best Bell Fantasy and the Player Profiler, playerprofiler.com, the Roto Underworld Cats, as it were. Hey, I want to tell everybody, in case you have not done this, I probably should have said this before we went to break, but we at the BSN are gamifying Thursday Night Football tonight on the BetterCast app. You can check out Moose and Keith's game preview of the Los Angeles Chargers and the Las Vegas Raiders, including some of their top picks and plays. Then you can actually compete in our free contest, answering pregame questions, which Bradley and I are about to do. Those are going to be live on the BetterCast app. They actually already are live on the BetterCast app right now. Tonight during the game, you can predict what's going to happen and test your NFL knowledge as well with some trivia questions on there. Chat with everybody hanging out on there about the big plays, the top performers, all the busts in real time. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to subscribe to anything. This is always free to play. You can watch Thursday Night Football with us, play our free contest, win tickets. The more questions you answer, the more tickets you win. And then you can redeem those tickets for authentic NFL signed gear, for collectibles. All you have to do is download the free BetterCast app right now in the App Store and Google Play. Have to be 18 years or older. That is the BetterCast app. Check it out right now. Let's talk about this game tonight, Bradley. And we'll kick things off with the Raiders quarter. At the start of the season, it was like, okay, we're looking at Garoppolo versus Herbert here this game. And it has now turned into Aiden O'Connell versus Easton Stick, just the way the NFL drew it up. The NFL is a game of attrition. This was always a possibility, and it's happening tonight. Aiden O'Connell, his passing yardage in the BetterCast app is set at 199.5. Are we going above that or below that tonight?
We're going to go below that, 199.5. O'Connell has struggled to get into the 200s this year. Devontae Adams is sick. We haven't seen consistent production over the last few weeks from Myers and from Mayer. And, this is a game where let's take a step back. There was some conversation about O'Connell not even starting this game for the Raiders. Like, who else is gonna start? Brian Hoyer. Shout out to Brian Hoyer, though.
Yeah.
Shout out to Super Bowl champion, St. Ignatius class of 2003.
Wow.
Shout out to you, Brian Hoyer. I think it's 03, 04. I think it's 04. I went to St. Ignatius too. So I know the Brian Hoyer. Yeah, shout out to him. Super Bowl champion. But, we don't know who was going to be the alternative, like someone off the street. Like Aiden O'Connell was going to get the start, but maybe there's a lack of confidence that Pierce has for O'Connell, maybe taking the ball out of his hands. This game does not project to be a shootout. So there's a lot of reasons and narrative surrounding O'Connell. I'm going to take the under for 199.5.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. When I saw that number, I was like, my goodness. I mean, it's not like Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers have been lighting it up the last couple of weeks. And 200 passing yards seems a lot for O'Connell, even against the Chargers. So I'm with you on that. So we went under there. this is a slam dunk under. Joshua Jacobs, 52.5 rushing yards. We're going under there, obviously, because he's not playing tonight. However, if this were to be Zamir White, Bradley, what would you set the over-under for rushing yards tonight for Zamir White?
48.5.
See, I was even going to go lower than that.
Yeah, it's going to be in the 40s. I think that that's fair, though, because I don't think the 30s would be a good spot. And the Chargers give up, let's see, I think it was the sixth most fantasy points to the running back position. But I think that there's also going to be some dump off, some PPR value there. So it's going to be in the 40s. Maybe 48.5 was a little high, but 40, 42.5, somewhere in that range. I think that would be fine.
Jim Parsons Jr. checking in again, this time via Facebook. I don't know if he's having issues. We said Zamir White over Deontay Foreman for you this week, Jim. So good luck there. And congratulations in the playoffs in all three of his leagues. No doubt from watching this show. I have absolutely no doubt that's why.
Well done.
Yes,
well
thank
done.
you. Well, it's a credit to co-hosts like you too. Don't forget about that. Joshua Palmer, let's move on. 32.5 receiving yards. He is fresh off of IR. Windows open. He's active tonight. There is no Keenan Allen. There is no Mike Williams. Quentin Johnston has been running wind sprints. Palmer, this is a prime spot for him to I mean, I don't want to say smash, but 32.5 seems low to me, doesn't it?
Well, was some chatter pregame that he was going to be limited in his snaps. And so if we're concerned about this, Josh Palmer returned from injury and limited on snaps, and the offense isn't going to do anything. And, I think this is a bigger Austin Eckler game, just Easton Stick dumping it off out of the backfield, those safer plays. Josh Palmer has historically been one of the worst PFF graded receiving wide receivers in the NFL. And I think Herbert has the confidence of I don't care how bad he is. I'm just going to throw the ball to him. 32.5 is what, one or two big plays. I don't think we get there for Josh Palmer. I'd take the under.
Okay, we'll go under. All right. I did not expect that, but you sold me on it. It makes sense. So who's the leading receiver for the Chargers tonight? I mean, is it going to be Johnston?
Wide receiver?
Yeah.
Yeah, wide receiver. Yikes. Probably Johnston.
So, you're saying Johnston for wide receiver. What if I open it up?
I don't feel good about it, though.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't think the Chargers do either. If we open up to anything.
Is it Jalen Guyton? Is it Jalen Guyton? Is it, we'll dig deep here. Is it Darius Davis? Is it Alex Erickson? Alex Erickson was actually getting some, I don't think he leads the team in receiving yards, but he had 5 targets last game. He didn't catch almost any of them. It was bad, but this is a guy who's running routes out there. So someone who is going to run routes for this offense, and it's going to be ugly. Maybe I'm rooting for Darius Davis. He was a 4th round pick, super duper speed guy, has already had one of the kick returns for a touchdown this year. A real big playmaker. Maybe he gets a little bit more out of the slot, but that's a deep cut. If you're in a really deep league and you need somebody, maybe Darius Davis.
All right, that's a deep cut. If we're playing the hits here, who is the leading pass catcher tonight? Is it Everett? Is it Eckler? Is it somebody else?
It's Eckler. I would rank them Eckler, then Everett, and then Johnston. Okay. And then a close next is your Josh Palmer.
Is Palmer. Okay. Okay, so we got Josh Palmer on under 32.5 receiving yards. Let's flip over to the Raiders. Devontae Adams, 68.5 receiving yards is what the Better Cast has on for him tonight as far as receiving yards goes. This past week, if we go back and we look at his performances at home against Minnesota, 53. The week, 2 weeks before that, when you exclude the bye, he was hitting this. 73 against the Chiefs, 82 against the Dolphins, 86 against the Jets. Does this suggest that he's going to go over tonight against the Chargers? How do you feel about Devontae Adams at 68.5 tonight?
I was already under on O'Connell, and I think that ties in. The stacking element, plays a role here. If we think that the Raiders are going to struggle to get the ball going, then I think we're going to also see a Devontae Adams under 68.5. at this point. Is he going to get the touchdown? Possibly.
Mhm.
Is he going to be PPR useful? Probably, but the yardage may not be there. So I'm not optimistic about Devontae Adams this week either.
Austin Eckler, only rushing yards only here, Bradley. 48.5 rushing yards is what his number is set at. Tell us a little bit about what you know about the Raiders' rush defense and whether Eckler is going to hit that number tonight.
Yeah, the Raiders give up the 7th most fantasy points to the running back position, and that is in PPR. So I think this is a plus matchup for Eckler overall. But 48.5, you're expecting Eckler to handle a significant amount of work. And on a short week, when there were rumors last week that Isaiah Spiller and Joshua Kelly would get more touches, it was Eckler who ended up getting into the end zone and salvaging his day, and it made it look pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those are still lingering. Before last week, Austin Eckler finished outside the top 30 of running backs in terms of fantasy points. And so our concern is that he's not going to get there yet again. And this is a matchup that's not going to need Austin Eckler to run between the tackles and grind out the time and handle the bulk of the carries. If the Chargers end up being in the lead, they're going to just run the ball out, with Josh Kelly or someone else. Isaiah, I don't know if they'll give a lot of Spiller, but I could see this being more of a Josh Kelly game than on the ground, at least, than Austin Eckler.
And I'm with you on that. I was going to ask you Kelly versus Spiller. I think Kelly's the guy that handles more touches tonight than Spiller. Let's go back to YouTube. GV hanging out. What up, fellas? What is up to you, GV? Thanks for hanging out. Zamir White or Terry McLaurin, full PPR for James in YouTube right now. I don't. Full PPR, I almost always go with the receiver. I like McLaurin significantly more than I like Zamir White. McLaurin gets the Rams. I know they're on the road, but there is a lot. I think that could be a big-time shootout game, too, the Rams-Commanders. I like the potential there. Give me a piece of it. I like McLaurin over Zamir White, Bradley.
Oh, that's so tough because I would normally go McLaurin as well, and maybe you'll talk me into it because of the off the bye against a forgiving, defense in a game that could get into a nice little shootout. The Washington Commanders defense is terrible. And if we think Stafford is going to be pushing the ball down the field, I even saw, Matthew Berry and Josh Larkey already put like Matthew Stafford as their top 3 quarterbacks for the week. I'm like, I'm going to be pretty high on Stafford this week, but I don't know if top 3 is going to be there. And so this game, if the talking heads are saying, hey, like this is going to be a shootout, and people that, are well respected in the industry are saying this is going to be a shootout, Stafford's going to push the ball. Sam Howell, we've seen, is able to keep with the other quarterbacks and to maintain that, like he doesn't fall to pieces if games get high scoring. And Terry McLaurin was shut out this past game against Miami. He didn't catch a single of his 3 targets. And in fact, Terry McLaurin has finished outside of the top 40 of wide receiver each of the last 4 weeks. That being said, I have them ranked both respectively as running back 29 and wide receiver 29 this week. So give me the game that's going to be a little bit more shootout-y as the tiebreaker between the two for this week.
We are of one mind on this. It is McLaurin. Back to YouTube. We'll get back to the Bettercast in 1 second. I do want to hammer out another question here. GV, Jaden Reed or Tyler Lockett this week? We kind of talked about Jaden Reed already, but what do you make of Tyler Lockett, Bradley, who is going to be going up against the Philadelphia Eagles? And this is a game at home. Very, very close to me. I think I like Reed better. I worry about, and I know Lockett led the Seahawks in receiving last week, but I just worry about him getting lost a little bit if Metcalf or JSN really turns it on. And if that's the case, you could be looking at 2 for 24 for Lockett. Packers are going out of their way to get Reed involved in the game plan. I like Reed a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Geno Smith is going to be available. He did return to practice on Thursday, but that's a good sign for his availability. If Geno Smith plays, it at least gives Tyler Lockett access to an elite ceiling that in a game where if it's Drew Lock throwing the ball, we're worried that the Philadelphia front seven is going to be able to get to him before he can throw the ball down the field and beat the Philly secondary. Philly secondary is vulnerable, and we've seen wide receivers have big games time and again this season. So it is a matchup that we're interested in if Geno is able to be active for this game. However, I do have Jayden Reed ranked ahead of Tyler Lockett for this week. We mentioned earlier that Jayden Reed has had 3 of his last 5 weeks as a top 12 wide receiver. No Christian Watson this week. We want Jayden Reed. The ceiling is obviously higher for Tyler Lockett if Geno Smith is active, but the probability favors Jayden Reed this week.
Yeah, and we're favoring Jayden Reed versus Tyler Lockett here in this instance. We'll go back to the YouTube chat in a second. Let's polish off this the rest of the Better Cast questions. We'll go to Easton Stick here. 189 passing yards here. We said 199 was too high for Aiden O'Connell. Are we also saying 189 is too aggressive for Stick? Who, by the way, and I'll say this about Easton Stick. I did not have a whole lot of confidence in this dude when Herbert got hurt last week. But Easton Stick came into that game, and granted, he had Keenan Allen, and he will not have Keenan Allen tonight. But dude went 13 to 24, 179 yards. I mean, that's nothing to shake a stick at when you're talking about just a partial game. So 189.5 with a full game. How do you feel about that number?
I not super confident. I mean, you lose Keenan Allen. That's one of the best route runners in the NFL. And now you're throwing out wind sprint kings. You know, like it's not just one wind sprint prince out there. It is wind sprint kings of Jalen Guyton, Quentin Johnston. You know, we mentioned other wide receivers. Alex Erickson could be there. Josh Palmer. Like these are not inspiring options. Gerald Everett has been dealing with on and off injuries over the last couple weeks too. So Austin Eckler is going to have to be the one to lead them to the promised land. You know, and so I think out of the backfield, Eckler is going to have a good PPR game. That's, I think, where you may be good at like a desperation deep back end quarterback too for Easton Stick. But I have Stick and O'Connell outside my top 24 of quarterbacks this week. So not a lot of confidence that they're going to be able to, although to be fair, like last Thursday when it was New England and Pittsburgh, I had Trubisky and Zappy outside the top 24, and look where they ended up. So, you know, like humility is part of this game, but when we talk about ranges of outcomes and missing weapons, those are narratives for Easton Stick to not be a strong fantasy option, much less a real life, you know, data stats, passing yards over under. Like it's hard to take the over in 189 there too.
We have taken the under on both passing totals for O'Connell and Stick. We have taken the under on Joshua Palmer and Devontae. We're taking the under everywhere. So now when it comes to being total points scored in this game, 34.5, I mean, I feel like we also have to take the under there, don't we?
How can we have confidence, you know, that it goes to 35? Like we're talking 17 and 18 points. You're going to have to see 2 touchdowns from a team, you know, and we're talking, you know, is it going to be Zamir White falling into the end zone? Is Austin Eckler falling into the end zone? Those are probably going to be 2 of the top options. Is like, if I'm taking touchdown, like first touchdown scored, it's one of those 2 most likely. But yeah, we don't have a lot of confidence that the wide receivers are going to get a lot going in this game, nor for either side.
I say we take the under here, and the last one, and that's what you're saying as well. The last one here is simply which team is going to win the game. Now, we're going to get 10 points if we pick the Raiders. We're going to get 10 points if we pick the Chargers. The Raiders, I'm looking at it right now, a 3-point favorite. Do we also take the Raiders because we're getting, you know, essentially the free points? We're taking the money line of the Raiders, of which are at minus 162. Does Aiden O'Connell come up with a big primetime win tonight, or do you take the Chargers here? What do you think, Bradley?
I'd rather have the Raiders. O'Connell's gotten some starts in the past, and I think that they have better weapons. You know, Devontae Adams, Michael Mayer is underrated. Shout out to Notre Dame. And you've got Zamir White, there as well. I think that the better weapons exist for the Raiders and moving the ball down the field. Eckler is going to be leaned upon so heavily. Like, is he going to get hurt in this game? Like, he's dealt with injuries earlier this season, and he's looked real slow. Like, if Eckler is the best option for you, based on what he's put up over the last 4+ weeks, that's concerning. Plus, you got not a rookie quarterback, and a very inexperienced quarterback. Easton Stick, 28 years old, has been around the block, but not gotten action. So I'm not confident in the LA Chargers, and we'll go with the Raiders.
We are going.
How about you, Bob?
We're going with the Raiders. I'm totally comfortable with that pick. With that pick, all 8 of our pregame questions are locked into the BetterCast app. You can lock yours in right now when you download the BetterCast app at the App Store or Google Play. Play it for free. It's going to be a lot of fun tonight. We'll hang out on there. We'll answer more questions. I'll try to win some more tickets, see if I can compete with everybody else hanging out in there. It's always fun. It's always a great conversation as well. One more thing I want to get to on the YouTube chat right now. Gooner Boy, I'll tell you what. Let's do this. We will answer GV's second question. I did not notice that. There's a second question there. Let's answer his question when we come back. And then Gooner Boy has a perfect springboard for us into Where Do You Stand On? The Where Do You Stand On segment for Bradley Stalder. In fact, we are going to be talking about Jerick McKinnon right when we come back. So don't go anywhere. It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, Fantasy Football Night in America, Better Sports Network. Bradley Stalder, Eric Balkman. So glad to have you aboard. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back for hour 2 right after this.
What can we expect from you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. Like, it's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Your heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite, but that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition, and I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through.
Come on! Hey! Come on! Let's go! Come on, dig it! Dig it! Yeah!
Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire, over Mark Malusis.
Awesome! That was so cool!
The champ is here! Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush, you were doing the Instagram Live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're going to win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose
no!
on the loose. Watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations, and no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
Yeah!
5 minutes past the top of the hour here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Welcome into hour number 2 of Fantasy Football Night in America. It's the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the Fantasy Football Players Championship. The RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the High Stakes Fantasy Football. Our guest co-host tonight, very gracious young man, very knowledgeable young man, and a guy who's had a lot of success in the fantasy industry. He's Bradley Stalder from bestbellfantasy.com and, of course, player profiler. At FF Stalder on the X machine. The FFPC Weekly Challenge is actually live for Week 15 right now. There's no draft. There's no salary cap. No convoluted rules. It's the same format as our FFPC Playoff Challenge, which you can also sign up for right now. At myffpc.com, you can play in a 10-team, a 30-team, or a 100-team contest. Pick your players and then just let them ride throughout the week. Results are determined by the total points accumulated by each individual lineup entry. Classic format available, slim roster available if you don't want to play with kickers and defenses. $35 to $200. There's a contest for everyone for entry fee. New users will get $25 off their first FFPC entry of $35 or more. All you have to use is the promo code ALARM at myffpc.com. That's ALARM. ALARM is the promo code. The website, myffpc.com. I meant to ask you this, Bradley, and I can't remember if I asked you this last time, so my apologies if I'm asking you again. Tell us about Best Bell Fantasy and where does that name come from?
Yeah, Best Bell Fantasy. The name comes from the notion that players are not just a singular outcome, that when they hit the field, that there is a range of outcomes for them to hit. And some players can access ceilings. Some players, their floors are really scary. And we've seen that, very much happen in wide receivers, for running backs. Actually, it's interesting, Bulky. A lot of players or a lot of fantasy gamers will say wide receivers are safe. There's a safe, this wide receiver is safe. Or occasionally like, oh, the Tyler Lockett's a very volatile wide receiver. That's a myth, actually. Yeah, we're looking at like ranges of outcomes when it comes to like you look at the top 10 wide receivers in terms of best ball value rating, like how valuable when they hit their ceilings, and how valuable they are when they hit their ceilings. And wide receivers in the half PPR setting end up hitting 12.5 fantasy points. Like the top 12 gets you about 50% of the time. So about half of the time, your top 12 wide receivers are busting. They're not delivering for you massive spike weeks or even like flex weeks. And so when you're thinking about like what type of players give me the highest, opportunity, you want to look at one of the pieces, of course, is what have they done in the past? What is their profile? What have they performed at? And what have players who have similar skill sets and similar types and similar roles done in the past as well? And so when we talk about like best bell, it's their best bell curve, for each of those players, that there is a distribution of their points, and part of that analysis occurs on the Best Bell Fantasy Football channel.
As soon as you started talking about it, I immediately remember I asked you this already, but I'm glad you gave me the reminder because I said this at the top of the show. We're always dealing with probabilities. That's what we're dealing with in fantasy football analysis. And that's how we try to get this information to you the best possible way. Speaking of best possible way of getting information to you, we didn't do it last hour for the second question for GV. GV wants to know, he's got a defense question this week. And ironically enough, these two teams are playing each other. Colts defense versus the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. This game is in Indianapolis, and I lean towards the Colts defense here, not because I think they're a better unit, but because I think the matchup is a little bit better. Gardner Minshew has the Colts playing pretty well. Zach Moss, I know it's been kind of a down, like the last 2 weeks, he should have been putting up better numbers, and he didn't. But I think those are more than likely going to change this week. I have very little faith in the Steelers offense in what they're able to do. It doesn't seem like it seems like it's a knife fight just to get them past 15 points every single week. And so I think that continues this week. I would play the Colts defense this week over the Steelers. He also wants to know rest of the season, but let's do Colts versus Steelers this week. Which defense is better, Bradley?
Yeah, my initial rankings have the Colts ahead of the Steelers. I have the Colts 9th. in my initial rankings, and the Steelers at 12. So it is close. So I understand that GV, you're kind of torn between these, and they're within probably a similar tier, but the lean does go to the Colts, given that Kenny Pickett is not expected to play, and then it's going to be the Mitchell Trubisky show yet again. So, yeah, give me the Colts.
Rest of season, the Steelers have the Bengals at home in Week 16. Then they go on the road to take on the Seattle Seahawks. The Indianapolis Colts, rest of season, next week, they get the Atlanta Falcons. I think they're in Atlanta for that game. And then they're at home against the Raiders. I don't really have a strong feeling here. I'd like to tell you to keep them both around and play the matchups here, but I don't know if you have that luxury. I don't really have a good feel rest of season. I guess I would say Steelers, but I'm just throwing stuff against the wall here.
Yeah, I do like the Colts, rest of season. We look at, Cincinnati. I mean, you're only playing for this week, week 16 and week 17. So Cincinnati, who Jake Browning is able to, get 300 passing yards. He's looked okay. And then you get the Seahawks, who should be healthier by that time, with Geno Smith and Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. They should be better. So I think that we're looking at the Colts, who we've seen the Raiders struggle to muster. We just took the under, right? In what we expect to be a good matchup for Aiden O'Connell. We took the under for 200 passing yards. And then the Falcons, Drake London just had the game of his life this past week, along with Desmond Ridder. He looked like a man on fire. But I don't know if we have the confidence that that's going to continue in week 16. So give me the lean of the Colts rest of season.
You say Colts, and I was kind of on the fence. I'd still lean a little towards the Steelers, but you obviously make a pretty good case for the Colts rest of the way as well. Where do you stand on is the segment that we're doing right now. Jerick McKinnon is where we're going to kick things off. Gooner Boy chimed in on YouTube. He wants to know if it's safe to drop Jerick McKinnon for Zamir White at this point. Obviously wanting to play Zamir White tonight. Isaiah Pacheco did not practice Wednesday. I have not seen the practice report today, but remember, they were talking about putting him on IR with this injury. So to me, for him to only miss 1 week, I don't know if I feel great about that. We talked a little bit about McKinnon earlier in the show. Let's frame it this way, Bradley. Where do you stand on Jerick McKinnon on your roster over Zamir White?
I'd rather have Jerick McKinnon. Better offense. We have more confidence in Patrick Mahomes, even though Mahomes has not played particularly well the last few weeks from a fantasy perspective. We look at Jerick McKinnon coming back, getting 7 touches in the game against Buffalo. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, yes, handling more touches, but the red zone carry went to Jerick McKinnon. He was able to convert pretty easily. And 37 total yards and the touchdown gets you to running back 21. It does not take a lot for Jerick McKinnon to get it for you. It probably will take a lot for Zamir White to get there for you. Like we'll need a lot more volume for Zamir White, and we're not guaranteed that he's any good, as you mentioned at the top of the hour. So I think the floor, as much as we're like, oh, the floor is scary for Jerick McKinnon, he's not going to get a lot of touches. I think the floor is also a little scary for Zamir White, which is why I don't have him in my top 24 for this week.
Bear this in mind, too, regarding Zamir White. This is speculation on my part. I'm just trying to read between the lines of this Josh Jacobs injury. They're playing on Thursday Night Football. This is like a mini bye. I think Jacobs comes back next week in week 16. So what are you doing here? Are you getting 1 week out of White? I mean, there's no guarantee that Pacheco plays this week. There's no guarantee he plays next week. And quite frankly, if they were talking about IRing him last week, 4 weeks is not out of the question. You could be getting a lot more usage for the remainder of the fantasy season on McKinnon, whereas White might be a one-and-done guy tonight. That's the other thing to keep in mind here. But interesting stuff.
Yeah, and you'll kick yourself letting someone else get Jerick McKinnon on their roster.
Oh, yeah, that's another great point, for sure. Absolutely. I wanted to talk about Chase Brown, but we kind of tackled that already. Pun intended. Austin Eckler. we could go a lot of different ways on this. Let's do this. Where do you stand on Austin Eckler as far as like what happened to him this year? Did you have a lot of shares with him? And I guess most importantly, what's the lesson we learned from Austin Eckler this year so we can avoid making a similar mistake with him or a player like him in 2024, Bradley?
This was a player, Austin Eckler, that I wasn't drafting unless it was the 111, 112, 201 of the best ball drafts. I think I was able to get him at the 201 in a couple, like in one of my Best Ball Mania 4 teams that now is making it to the next round. I got Austin Eckler at that turn. And this was also at the time where the Chargers were trying to get Eckler to move along with his contract. And he was like, no, I want a contract extension. So they compromised and gave him a couple more $1 million, but that was it. And I think one of the lessons we can take away from this is Austin Eckler, undrafted free agent. He'll be 29 next year. Mm-hmm. The team already indicated to us a lack of confidence in long-term investment, despite his skill set. Like Austin Eckler is not just running back. He's also a reliable pass catcher out of the backfield, but it's how the team is handling him and treating him like, well, he's just another running back, right? And he's not Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry right now running back 15 on the year in terms of fantasy points per game, but he'll be 30, mm-hmm. Here in the next month. So Austin Eckler is a player that we should have been a little bit more hesitant that the age cliff would come, and the team was hesitant to give him even just 2 years. They were just willing to give him a pay bump. So when we see indicators like that, it's not, oh, I'm not going to draft this player, but there are flags for us to say, hey, like maybe we should just value him a little bit lower, and that the floor is a little scarier. And maybe he doesn't have a lot of competition, but it still doesn't preclude us from saying the ranges of outcomes now is a little bit wider, given his age, given the age cliff, given the team's lack of willing to go long term with him.
Austin Eckler, the issue for me with him is, and I always get nervous. I've instituted a new rule, a new personal rule, that in all my dynasty leagues, and who's ever watching, if you're watching and you play against me in dynasty, you're going to get a trade offer. Once these guys turn 27, I'm out. Like I'm trading them. I'm seeing what I can get. Like it's not worth it at that point. Similar to it not being worth investing a mid first round pick, sometimes an early first round pick on a guy who is going to be in his age 28 season on a team with, granted, Kellen Moore was exciting, but it is a new offense, new offensive coordinator. Sometimes that doesn't always jive with what we want for fantasy. So I think there were some red flags for Austin Eckler. Certainly, I don't know if anybody predicted this, but it's been bad. Let's do this. Tyler Soto, who I forgot to give a shout out at the top of the show, is our producer tonight. Follow him on the X at Heavy T on air. He has 2 questions. Let's get to his first one. For a flex spot, he's got Ty Chandler, Kenneth Walker, James Conner, or Jalen Waddle. He can only pick one of those guys. Nice squad that you've assembled here. So Chandler, Walker, Conner, or Waddle, who is your pick for his flex there?
Oh, man. Especially because Tyreek Hill is seriously questionable for this week. We can't not play Jalen Waddle. We saw what Jalen Waddle was able to do a couple years ago when it was just him as the wide receiver 1. We saw some massive ceiling games, 25+% target share, and that could get into the 30% if Hill misses, and 30% might even be conservative. Yeah. I mean, Jalen Waddle, I was thinking he would be a mid-second round pick in fantasy if Tyreek wasn't on the team. And now, Tyreek is there. It bumped Waddle down into the 3rd round in a lot of drafts. But even looking at his rookie year, Jalen Waddle came on very strong without Tyreek Hill. Give me Waddle with the expected target share. Yeah, 26% target rate, 25% target share that rookie year as a rookie.
Yeah.
You know, in that offense. So he's going to get a lot of touches, and I want Waddle, even in maybe a tough matchup, and tough matchups moving forward. Still give me Waddle over Chandler, who may not get the rush volume that we want. Kenneth Walker's been dealing with injuries, and James Conner, with Kyler Murray back. James Conner averages, I can't remember if it's 4 or 5 fewer fantasy points per game with Kyler Murray back in the lineup versus being out. So give me Jalen Waddle.
You know, and the other thing too is even if Hill isn't out, Waddle still has a pretty high ceiling, you know, and I think you have to look at that as well. Chandler, there's some question marks there. Walker, I just don't like at all this week. And then Connor, I think that there's some question marks there, at least more question marks than I'd have with Jalen Waddle. His second question, he's got another flex spot. It's either Javonte Williams or it's Garrett Wilson. Now, this is interesting. So Javonte Williams this week, I believe Saturday night, evening game, not matinee, at Detroit is Javonte Williams this week. Then you look at Garrett Wilson, who, by the way, has the AFC Offensive Player of the Week throwing to him this week at Miami. I'm not making this up. Like, tell me there's not more proof that we are living in a simulation that the AFC and NFC Offensive Players of the Week this week, Zach Wilson and Tommy DeVito. Don't nobody had that one at the top of the season on their bingo card, which is crazy town banana pants for me. Garrett Wilson at Miami, Javonte Williams at Detroit. Tyler's only got one slot for him. Who are you picking?
Oh, man. So the Jets get Miami.
Yep.
Yikes. That is, I mean, last time the Jets got Miami, Garrett Wilson went 7 for 44.
Mm-hmm.
He had the touchdown, which bailed him out, but it was an ugly showing. And I think, I know we like to think, oh, Zach Wilson what's the worst that they can do? And can get benched. Well, I mean, he's playing for not just his job right now, but his job like next season, because Aaron Rodgers is expected to come back. I know that people will be like, oh, Zach Wilson will be a great backup quarterback. I think the Jets will look at upgrading their quarterback too. Even if Zach Wilson wins a 1 week award, they know what they have in Zach Wilson. Javonte Williams, that game we mentioned, can get into a big time shootout for both teams to push the score.
Mm-hmm.
So give me Javonte Williams, who had been struggling to get in the end zone, but was able to last week against the Chargers, 17 of 66. Not been super efficient on the ground this year, but what's really encouraging is the passing game usage. 3 receptions, 25 yards, one of those in 4 of the last 5 games. So we've seen some really good games from Javonte Williams. I think he's going to get the volume. There's touchdown equity there. Give me Javonte.
And I'm kind of with you on this too. For the reasons you stated, the volume as well. I am a little bit nervous about the matchup for Garrett Wilson as well. So we're saying Javonte Williams there, Tyler. Hopefully it works out with you. Good luck to Gooner Boy, who did start Zamir White tonight over Deontay Johnson and Devon Achane. The Chargers already had the ball once. They were forced to punt. Raiders now have it in Chargers territory. A handoff, actually. I believe that is Zamir White that I'm seeing here, as he gets roughly about 2 or 3 yards there on a off-tackle run, or more of a sweep, I guess. 10 minutes to go in the first quarter, second down for the Raiders. They're second and short. Let's get into Ezekiel Elliott here. No Ramondre Stevenson, probably this week. He didn't play last week, and Elliott went crazy. When you look at Elliott going forward now, where do you stand on Ezekiel Elliott for the final 3 games of the fantasy season, Bradley?
I mean, how can we not put Zeke into our lineups moving forward? He's going to get so much volume. And like Zeke, this was the wild stat that like I couldn't believe. Ezekiel Elliott had more fantasy points last week than Ramondre Stevenson had in any one game this season. Like, Zeke is old and crusty, yeah, but if you give a guy who knows how to carry the ball and knows how to get open and can stay on the field for 3 downs because he's a good pass blocker.
Right, yeah.
then he's going to be fantasy useful, especially if you get close to the goal line. This is a guy who's had double-digit touchdowns in, I don't know, pretty much every season of his career.
Mhm.
So Zeke Elliott is a top 20 running back, easy rest of season as long as Ramondre's out.
What about well, I mean, his contract runs out after this year, right? He's not under contract with New England next year, is he?
It's a one-year deal. I believe.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll talk about Ezekiel Elliott next year because he could be playing, for anybody next year. We'll see what happens there. Derrick Henry, how is he doing it? This is a guy that I have left for dead so many times, hardly ever draft him, and then once again he's getting it done. Quite frankly, he's getting it done on a team with Tyjae Spears, his own teammate, who was out snapping him several weeks this year, Bradley, and he's still getting it done. Smoke and mirrors. Is this the last great season we're going to see of Derrick Henry? I mean, I feel like I've said that the last 3 years. Where do you stand on Derrick Henry right now?
I think next year we're going to see a Zeke Elliott type of season from Derrick Henry, where he will be a first and second down guy and on some other team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think or the Tennessee Titans will re-sign him, but involve Tyjae Spears more into year number 2. The reality is he's going to turn 30 this next month. He is, averaging a career low 15 fantasy points per game since, he took over the starting role in 2019. 2018, he did have a good year, but since 2019, this has been his lowest fantasy points per game outing. He has 5 screws in his foot. We remember that from a year and a half ago in 2021, where he missed 8 games. So Derrick Henry is a player that I don't think goes away, but is going to be trusted by some team to handle the majority of carries as a first and second down back. And as I said, I don't think he goes away in 2024. We're looking at a Kareem Hunt plus, a Zeke Elliott plus, a Leonard Fournette plus. That's the type of, we were drafting those players so late and they didn't really hit too much, except Zeke has come on these last few weeks. I think Derrick Henry will have a better 2024 than any of those 3, despite the fact that I do expect him to have fewer touches, fewer carries. I mean, 214 rush attempts through 13 games. He had 219 in 8 games in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference in volume and rushing, we've already seen that with Tyjae Spears. So I think that is going to be moved more toward, Derrick Henry being more like a back-end running back 2 with touchdown upside instead of the high-end running back 2 with mid-pack running back 1 upside that we see this year.
I think Derrick Henry might finally be. I mean, we'll see where he comes in on drafts. FFPC will have drafts going on in mid-January. I mean, we're probably only a few weeks away from that, but we'll see where he's going to end up going in drafts. He might actually go in a spot next year, Bradley, where I'm comfortable taking him. Because he won't have this massive draft capital anymore. And if he's Kareem Hunt plus, that's valuable. I mean, there is a value for that on your fantasy football team for sure. Okay, Brian Robinson, we have to talk about him. And I know this is kind of a weird situation, but he did not practice again today. 2 consecutive missed practices because of a hamstring issue. The Commanders were on bye last week, so, he obviously didn't have to tax himself then. And it certainly seems like whatever the bye week did, it wasn't enough. And he might be out again this week. We could talk about Antonio Gibson. We could talk about Chris Rodriguez. Where do you stand on Brian Robinson the rest of the way? I mean, is this a hamstring thing where you're just not going to feel confident? Here's the thing. If he doesn't play this week, I don't know if you're going to feel confident playing him in week 15. And then it's like, if he doesn't show anything there, then all of a sudden, what are we doing with this guy the rest of the way? Where do you stand on Brian Robinson right now?
Yeah, it's going to be hard to play Robinson until we get the word from the coaches that, hey, he's going to be the guy. I do believe that if it gets to week 17, that Brian Robinson is going to be, we got Zamir White touchdown.
Yep, we do.
But I do believe that Brian Robinson will be the guy week 17 if he's healthy. That's just the Commanders are not playing for anything, but they also, Brian Robinson is still under contract for the next 2 years. And maybe I don't see Rivera moving away from Brian Robinson. Antonio Gibson, they already know what they have in Antonio Gibson. And so Chris Rodriguez hasn't done anything to show us that, hey, I can do something different than Brian Robinson. I can separate myself from there. So I do think if he's healthy, he's going to get the majority of carries when he's back. And I think that they're willing to throw him in pretty quickly to do that. I mean, let's look at last season, 2022, when he came back from being shot, right? Week 5, still nearly 30% of snaps, and then he was able to get back up to nearly 50% in the second game. So if he misses just week 15 and then gets back, we can start him week 17 if he's active in 16.
How do you how nervous are you about Chris Olave? Not, I mean, obviously because of the injury, because of the ankle he's dealing with, and I gotta look up the practice report. But it seems like, and I can't remember who said this. Somebody on the show. Oh God, this is really going to irritate me. But they said, you know, it was Olave and it was one other guy, and I can't remember who it was. But I remember specifically of Olave. They said, you know, unless this guy is getting in the end zone, you are really playing with fire, putting him in your lineup on a week-to-week basis. And it stinks because we know how talented the dude is, and we know the numbers he can put up. But he's not putting those up unless he's scoring a touchdown. Bradley Stalder, where do you stand on Chris Olave?
He doesn't need to score a touchdown. He needs Jameis Winston as quarterback.
Yeah,
that's what he needs.
Yes, he does.
He needs Jameis. He needs famous Jameis. Chris Olave leads all wide receivers in unrealized air yards, 1,007. He has more unrealized air yards than most wide receivers have as actual receiving yards. So this is just wild that 8.7 unrealized air yards per target.
You know, like there's stats and then there's stats, obviously. And I have been saying, like, who was I talking to? And they were freaking out about Derek Carr. Oh God, I don't know if Carr is going to go this week. Like, and they're worried about like what it means for Olave and Rashid Shaheed and Michael Thomas. And I'm like,
it's great.
You should be wanting Derek Carr to take it easy. You should be wanting Derek Carr to rest up. You should be wanting him on the bench. Yeah, Winston's going to throw picks, but Winston takes chances and he could push the ball down the field. You're talking about a dude who threw for 5,000 plus yards, 30 plus touchdowns, 30 plus interceptions, which, you know, you probably care about if you're starting Winston. We're not starting Winston. We're starting Olave. We were starting Michael Thomas.
Right.
We were starting Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill. Like, this is what we have to be looking at here. And like Derek Carr being on the bench for Jameis Winston is a good thing. And I don't think a lot of people pick up on that, but this is the reality of the situation.
Yes. I am here for, well, I'll take a step back. Way back in the off season, I was given a lot of crud about from even friends at Player Profiler who said, you know, Chris Olave is going to be, you know, this game breaker. And I was like, you know, I love his talent. I think Balky, you and I and everybody else love what Chris Olave can do. Problem is, of course, that offense. And so when they're run heavy with Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill, and Kendrick Miller hasn't really hit this year, but Jamal Williams got some rushes earlier in the season. Like, there's a lot of rushing that happens. And then if you're giving the ball to Kamara near the goal line, you're going to see those touchdowns not hit. And I wrote an article last week about Chris Olave and among other players. And I said Olave averages 18.9 fantasy points per game, where Jameis Winston at least drops back 5 times. Compare that to when Derek Carr plays and Jameis Winston doesn't get at least 5 dropbacks. Olave averages only 12.3 fantasy points per game. That is a 50% increase, approximately, for those doing the math at home, when Jameis Winston gets you the dang ball. So yes, give me some Jameis Winston for fantasy.
I love it. And I'm repping my Florida State Seminoles tonight, like the free Jameis. I should add that on the back, get a hashtag free Jameis on this one. The point I wanted to bring up here in the YouTube chat, EBK303 hanging out watching the game with us. He said Denver's going to take the AFC West this year. That's a bold It's a bold claim. We'll see what happens. A handful of games remaining. The Raiders are winning this battle of AFC West teams tonight. As Bradley pointed out, it was a 1-yard plunge from Zamir White that has put the Raiders up 7-0. Chargers now have it at about midfield, 2nd and 10, just over 6 minutes to go in the first quarter from Las Vegas. Easton Stick has just been sacked. He did fumble, and I think the Raiders do have the football. Yes, Raiders football right now. They recover at the Chargers about the 42-yard line. So we have our first turnover of the game as we are following it very, very closely here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on BSN. We'll step out. We'll take our final break. When we come back, we'll get you some starts and sits, lineup decisions. I know you've been flooding them in the YouTube chat tonight, but we'll get into some more, including T. Higgins, Chuba Hubbard, Pat Fryermuth, and much more. Bradley Stalder from Player Profiler and Best Bell Fantasy. I'm Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship. We'll be back right after this. Don't go anywhere.
From the Hometown Hero series, Zach Parise.
That is a very nice card, and that's one I'm probably going to have to organize a little trade ski with you, because I would actually like that card.
You got downtown Newark in the background. I mean, Newark has never looked so good.
No, it is not.
We'll put that back up on the screen. I just want to have a penny sleeve ready, and yes, we can absolutely work out a little trade ski for that, because that belongs in a Devil Fans collection right there.
I'll trade you the Braden Schneider rookie card for it.
Done.
There we go. The first card-for-card trade on Rip and Riff history. And it was that easy.
It was that easy. That's because, you know what? Because neither one of us are jerks. And it's the same thing when we try and do fantasy trades. Like, we don't try and screw each other. We have conversations. If there's a fit, there's a fit. If it's not, it's not. We don't try and, take the other one over the barrel. So there you go. In a penny sleeve. Hometown hero, Zach Parise. He was among the league's most productive goal scorers in 06-07 and followed up with a terrific regular season with an even more impressive postseason. And then they talk about what he did in the first round series against Tampa Bay that year. So that's off to the side for you.
That's true. And, if this is it for his career, he had a hell of a career.
He did.
Hopefully he comes back one more year with the Islanders, but if he doesn't, hell of a run.
All right, looks like Aiden O'Connell, incomplete pass intended for Devontae Adams. How we're trending so far, Easton Stick only 28 passing yards, Aiden O'Connell 44.
All right.
So
my fault again.
We are we are trending toward the unders still, I think, for those passing yards. So I'm here for that.
I am here for the remainder of the show. I promise you. I cannot time these breaks right. I just never do. That's on me. Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, Better Sports Network. Bradley Stalder from Player Profiler, Best Bell Fantasy. I'm Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, hanging out with you, watching the Raiders-Chargers game here. Raiders driving after that turnover by Easton Stick. Michael Mayer. We didn't talk about Michael Mayer at all. Bradley, how much Dynasty do you play?
Enough. I was invited to another one just this morning.
Oh, really?
One of my buddies was like, "Hey, you're a degenerate. Do you want to do another Dynasty league?" I'm like, probably. And I'm like a sicko. This is like another 32 team Dynasty league that I'm in with these guys, and they we want another one. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, but this is fun. It's fun. It challenges your depth of knowledge of the players too.
It does. And Michael Mayer is a guy he just made. And by the way, we got a touchdown here from Aiden O'Connell. This was probably, I don't know, maybe a 29-yarder, 30-yarder, somewhere around there. No. Yeah, about 30-yard touchdown to Trey Tucker. Now, it looked like he bobbled it, but I still think he got both feet in. The right foot, maybe not. They're looking at this right now. Otherwise, it will be, if it stands, it's going to be a 30-yard touchdown pass to Trey Tucker from Aiden O'Connell. A sentence I never thought I'd be saying at all this year.
54 spots ahead of consensus on Trey Tucker.
Really?
Yeah, so let's go.
Yes.
Let's go, Trey Tucker. If he comes down with it. If not, I was not that high on Trey Tucker.
He catches it. He bobbles. He gets it. It's a matter of like when he grabbed it, was the right foot still down? Because I don't think he gets the right foot down again. He definitely has one down. But it's a matter of the way
Did
that
they rule it a touchdown?
they ruled it a touchdown on the field. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. It looks like when he gathers the ball, he kind of like catches it and then like re-grabs it to hold on to it. And it looks like when he finally gets control of it, and Prime's going to step out for a commercial here. When he gets control of it, it looked like that right foot was up. So we'll update you on that shortly. All right, let's get into some starter sits right now, Bradley. Here's an interesting one, and we kind of talked about this Commanders-Rams matchup earlier. Would you bench Tua Tagovailoa this week, who is against the Jets, in favor of Sam Howell at the Rams?
Yes. I have Howell ranked higher this week.
Okay, but you make it seem like it's like kind of a no-brainer. I think people are going to have a tough time doing that if they've had Sam Howell backing up Tagovailoa all season. Now you get to the playoffs. That's a tough box to check and uncheck.
Yeah, we've seen spike weeks from Tua, but those have been on the back of these 50, 60-yard touchdowns to Tyreek Hill. Hill, as we mentioned, is nursing this injury, and while we do like Jalen Waddle, the New York Jets have 3 of like the top 25 cornerbacks in the NFL. You got DJ Reed, you got Sauce Gardner, you've got Michael Carter. Like, you've got players who are really good in the secondary. And that's why teams, when they try to beat the Jets, they try to do it on the ground and not through the air. So Tua, who is vulnerable to making mistakes, he's a big play waiting to happen, but he's not an elite decision maker, and he doesn't have an elite arm. And so those are limiting factors when you're facing a defense like led by Sauce Gardner. So give me Sam Howell in a game that can get really spicy really fast.
One thing I did fail to mention too, the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription is available to you right now. You can unlock all the content for all sports, including annual draft guides, one-on-one expert access in the Discord. You can analyze matchups and trends in your leagues with the League Sync. The lineup generator is integrated with Fanjections as well. There's daily and weekly rankings. The value vault is there, position coaches, waiver wire ownership percentages, projections, stats, and tools. You can build better lineups guaranteed. Get access to everything Fantasy Alarm offers all year. Just use the promo code LOCK, L-O-C-K, LOCK at fantasyalarm.com/lock, fantasyalarm.com/lock. Chuba Hubbard, are you surprised at the way he has taken over that Carolina backfield over Miles Sanders, Bradley? And if so, is it enough for you to say, yeah, I'm playing him over Jaylen Warren this week?
Chuba Hubbard was one of my favorite later round picks. I was drafting him a ton on DK. When we got reports, not only that Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders were splitting the carries, but also that Sanders was dealing with some injuries right before the start of the season. And so my concern was, hey, Chuba Hubbard's been a pretty efficient back. He was a player that I profiled positively coming out of last season in the receiving game, and also respectable rusher. And I think that he should have declared earlier. He went back for his final year, and things just got worse for him in college. And so he fell to the 4th round. I think he was a better prospect than a 4th round pick, probably closer to the 3rd round, maybe late 2nd round. But he had to work his way up the depth chart in Carolina. Then there was a new coaching staff from this past year, and then it gets fired. And now Chuba Hubbard, has the most rushing yard or most rush attempts among all running backs over the last 3 weeks. Chuba Hubbard also upholding and good enough efficiency metrics to hold off a really ineffective Miles Sanders. So give me all I love Chuba Hubbard. He's been a big win for me, and I do have him ahead of Jaylen Warren in my way too early, only counting Thursday as looking really hard at. But I do have Chuba over Jaylen Warren by a couple spots. Chuba at 22, Warren at 26 this week.
So it is Hubbard over Warren for you. A fun one here, or maybe not so fun. By the way, just an update on the game. They did call that a good touchdown by Trey Tucker. So excellent call by Mr. Bradley Stalder, who was way ahead of consensus on Trey Tucker this week. Daniel Carlson, beg your pardon, has pounded the extra point through. It is now 14-0 Raiders. 16 plays, 105 yards for the Raiders so far, 7 plays for 28 yards for the Chargers as they begin this drive. 1st and 10 from their own 25, 4:41 to go in the first quarter as Easton Stick tries to right the ship here for the Chargers.
In fact, I was the highest ranker this past week among all rankers. Out of the almost 200 rankers on Fantasy Pros, I was the highest by far on Trey Tucker. So even ahead of Billy. So Billy was actually second. Shout out to Billy Muzio, friend in the industry. Balky and I, many eons ago, Balky was one of our first guests.
That's right.
On the Fantasy Football Fanalist podcast. And that's where Billy and I got our start in the industry and creating content. And now look at us, both highly ranking Trey Tucker, and now coming down with this 30-yard touchdown. It feels good to be, it feels good to be the king.
It does not feel good to be a Chargers fan right now. They are far from kings. First play from scrimmage here on this drive. Joshua Kelly gets the ball, not Austin Eckler, and he promptly fumbles the ball. The Raiders have fallen on it. So it is Raiders ball deep in the Chargers territory. I think they looked at it. It looked like Kelly was on bodies and it was a legit fumble. He was not down. And indeed, the Raiders do take over with the ball. 4:36 to go at the Chargers 31-yard line. Going to be about the 36 because the Raiders were just penalized for a false start. So this is getting wild early. Thursday night football, man. You never know what's going to happen. At the start of the season, you probably were excited about having Marquise Brown and T. Higgins on your team. Now fast forward to week 15, you're like, good Lord, I can't believe I have to play one of these guys this week. That's sort of what we've been dealing with all season long. Marquise Brown against the Niners this week at home. Certainly not the greatest of matchups. Not terrible, but not great. And T. Higgins is going to be at home on Saturday night. Not Saturday night against or is that a Saturday night game? The Saturday night game is Detroit. I'm sorry. Marquise Brown,
1 p.m. Sunday.
1 p.m. Sunday.
1 p.m. Saturdays. 1 p.m.
1 p.m. Saturday.
Sorry,
So it leads. So that's the first game on Saturday. So you have Marquise Brown at home against the Niners, T. Higgins at home against the Vikings. You got to play one. Who's it going to be?
Oh man, it's a coin flip. So every week, Billy and I have this podcast called The Dominator. So shout out to Billy. He and I have this start sit show called The Dominator, Lineup Lockdown Edition, and we have this phrase called the coin flip, and it makes sense. It's two players that are literally next to each other in the rankings, and we just flip a coin. And because that's how we handle those types of situations, because we don't know. Like, it's so darn close. And for my initial rankings, I have to pull out the coin flip here, Balky, because I have Hollywood at 36 and T. Higgins at 37 in my way too early rankings. And I think that's an appropriate ranking for them because there's reasons for optimism and reasons for, oh my gosh, I need to be like away from this player. Right. T had the nice game last week with the touchdown, but we've also seen the floor games from T. Higgins, and now it's Jake Browning. We already talked about our fear for Jamar Chase. So if it's a Chase game, it's not going to be a T. Higgins game. We know that only one of those guys can probably coexist in that offense, given Jake Browning. But Hollywood Brown hasn't been great with Kyler returning. So we have concerns, but at the same time, we want Hollywood, and the targets in San Francisco's secondary is very, very vulnerable. So we could see it going both ways. This is one of those back end wide receiver 3 situations where you just flip a coin and hope for the best. And we'll see where the rankings take us later, but this is a coin flip.
Yeah. I can't pick one. I mean, I guess I would say Brown, but I don't know. It's so close. What's not close is this Thursday night game. Mother of God, Aiden O'Connell just threw an absolute beautiful bucket pass down the right sideline to Jacoby Myers, who made a fantastic diving catch and falls into the end zone. The extra point is good. It is 21-0 with 2 Chargers turnovers, a Zamir White touchdown, a Trey Tucker touchdown, and now Jacoby Myers on a beautiful pass, beautiful catch. I mean, it was a thing of beauty. That was like Carr to Adams, or not Carr to Adams. It was like Well, a good quarterback to Adams. It was fantastic. So
Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers to Devontae Adams. We'll say that. So now 3:07 to go, first quarter. Raiders kicking off to the Chargers, up 21-0, just like we said it was going to happen. It is what it is. Moving on. Tight ends.
It might be 35. It might be 35-0 by the time we get, and we lose the under just from the Raiders score.
Oh, and in future news, the final score tonight: Chargers 27, Raiders 24. You know it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen. It's like I've seen the script for this one. I know it's going to happen. Tight ends this week, Bradley. Let's talk about Hunter Henry. Big week last week. I had him on so many benches, and it's really tough for me to get upset for him, scoring those 2 touchdowns. I never really considered starting him, so it's like it is what it is. But Hunter Henry this week at home against Kansas City Chiefs in what should be a good game script for him, you would think, or Chigoziem Okonkwo. Chigoziem Okonkwo is at home against the Houston Texans this week. And if you look at what he did last week, the Maryland Terrapin, as I vamp for time because my computer just locked up. Okonkwo, 6 targets. He catches 5 of them for 46 yards. Dude has had at least 45 yards the last 3 weeks, each of the last 3 weeks. I don't know if he's coming on. I don't know if there's something here with Levis. I don't know, but I'm paying attention. If you can only play one of these guys this week, I like Chig Okonkwo here. Who do you like, Bradley?
I also like Chig Okonkwo. Hunter Henry did have the nice game. I drafted a lot of Hunter Henry in best ball, but not in a lot of redraft leagues. And so I didn't leave him on a lot of benches because he ended up making my starting lineup in the best ball tournaments. So I do like what Chigo has done lately. Chig Okonkwo, you mentioned the recent games, but even before that, we look at 5 of the last 7 games, at least 5 targets for Chig Okonkwo. So he has been coming on a little bit more lately. He was a top 11 tight end back in week 13. So yeah, give me Chig Okonkwo. I understand the hype is there for Hunter Henry, but I think that was just a scheme that the Patriots took advantage of, and so I don't think they're going to be. The Chiefs' defense is pretty tough, so I'm not thinking that Hunter Henry is going to have a replicated game like last week.
I think you just look at the volume, like you said. Okonkwo's getting it. Henry, might have been a flash in the pan, and he gets a tough matchup this week. FFPC premium scoring. Let's assume that Devin Singletary this week, Bradley. Do you like him over Logan Thomas, who's coming off the bye? I usually break ties in favor of the tight end in FFPC. I actually like Logan Thomas over Singletary this week. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I like Logan Thomas as well. Singletary is still splitting carries with Dameon Pierce. Pierce got the touchdown a couple weeks ago. This game is also, I'm worried about the Texans offense in a whole because CJ Stroud is still in concussion protocol. So I am worried overall. It looks like Davis Mills is going to get the start. That's where the news is trending. So I am concerned that this is going to be a problem for the Houston Texans offense. Give me Logan Thomas in a potential shootout game with the Rams.
Yeah, what's the total? We've been talking about that game all night. What's the total on that? Do you have that in front of you? I can get it here in a second.
Washington at LA 50.5
wow.
is the game.
Yeah,
total.
that could be. And the other, I always like looking at the totals every week. You're looking at 47.5 for Eagles Seahawks, 50.5 for Cowboys Bills. That could be fun too. The Cardinals Niners game is at 47.5 as well. It's like as we get deeper into the week, these later games seem to have the higher total, although Broncos Lions 47.5 on that too. Wow, fast. And I wonder what the in game is for tonight's total with its 21-0 already. It could be a 45-46 here as Gerald Everett catches a pass over the middle. I'm not making this up. He fumbles. But yes, I'm not. Yeah, he legit fumbled, but Jalen Guyton was right there to fall on it. So, God, have the Chargers just given up on the season? No Herbert, no Allen. I mean, Staley's probably on his way.
They should have fired. They should have fired Staley when they had the chance.
Right. Yeah. And they're going to have a chance now. I mean, there's no reason for him to stick around. It looked like Everett might have been down anyway. It doesn't really matter because the Chargers recovered. Moving on. Pat Freiermuth or George Pickens? How about a battle of Steelers pass catchers this week? Which one do you like better? And can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on just George Pickens in general, Bradley?
Oh, George Pickens is a dog. He's got the dog in him.
The
problem
Georgia
is that
Bulldog,
George,
right?
he literally is. I like him as, he's not an alpha though. Like he's
Right.
got like the swagger and but Deontay Johnson's always going to get more targets than George Pickens, but Pickens has the big playability that I think Deontay Johnson does not have as often. And so if we're looking in the best ball streets for upside, George Pickens has had some really nice games this season. But Deontay Johnson, I think, has a safer floor as we're moving forward. Give me George Pickens still. With the shots down the field.
Now, if I said tight end premium scoring, you're still saying Pickens for this week?
I think that might lean Freiermuth still. I think we might move it to Freiermuth.
I'm with you, by the way.
Tight end premium.
Like standard PPR, I would play Pickens over Freiermuth. Tight end premium for me, it's Freiermuth.
Yep.
Wow, what a show! Holy cow, we covered a lot of ground tonight, as we always do. Bradley Stalder from playerprofiler.com, bestspellfantasy.com, at @FFStalder. Certainly check out everything that you are producing besides the 3 spots I just mentioned on Twitter, Best Bell Fantasy, and then Player Profiler. What is the best way to consume more Bradley Stalder content for our viewers tonight?
Yeah, the X Machine at FF Stalder. I post and retweet all the things. There's also some exciting things brewing for Best Bell Fantasy moving forward. I mean, I'm also crushing it. I was on 5 Player Profiler shows just last week, so we're bringing up the fantasy goodness for everybody. It is playoff time, so time to get some of those most accurate rankings. Get those from me and start sits, and just we'll continue to win some fantasy championships. So, Balky, I'm super grateful that you invited me on yet again. Hopefully, I didn't ruin anything,
Not at all.
But I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been great. I appreciate you, and this has been a lot of fun today.
It always is hanging out with you for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, that will complete our show. Shout out to Bradley Stalder and Tyler Soto for hanging out with us. Tyler Soto, our producer tonight. We're back at 7 p.m. next Thursday. Pat Fitzmaurice from Fantasy Pros will co-host with me for the
It's
full
his
2
birthday
hours.
today.
Is it really?
Happy birthday, Pat.
Happy birthday to
Let's
Pat.
go.
How about that? No wonder this is fascinating because I didn't. I booked you before I asked him. But that would make sense where he wouldn't want to do the show tonight. Happy birthday, Pat Fitzmaurice. MyFFPC.com is where to go for the FFPC Weekly Challenge, the FFPC Playoff Challenge. You can sign up for those. $35 or $200 to enter. Win up to $2,500, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight. We'll see you in the Better Cast. Enjoy the rest of the game. I'm sure the Raiders are probably up 42-0 now by the time we sign off. But I'll see you in the Better Cast. Thanks so much for hanging out. We'll talk with you next week on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. He's Bradley Stalder. I'm Eric Balkman. See you soon.